Since J.D. Vance became Donald Trump's running mate, he has said a lot of truly unbelievable things. This one, though, this one might take the cake.
The one thing that I think the Marines really do well is we have the best motto. I have a favorite motto of the U.S. military, and of course I'm biased, but Semper Fidelis, always faithful. Right? You hear Marines say it all the time, Semper Fi. I really do think that Donald Trump exemplifies that motto. His record and his vision is a vision of always being faithful to those who put on the uniform.
Almost everywhere J.D. Vance goes, he has been talking about military service and elevating military service to a central part of the Trump-Vance ticket. First, Vance tried unsuccessfully to attack Vice President Harris's running mate, Governor Tim Walz, on his military service, despite the fact that Walz served 24 years in the National Guard. Now Vance is trying to use his own military bona fides, which he fully deserves, but now Vance is trying to use his military credentials to boost his running mate, Donald Trump, as always faithful to those in uniform. The main problem with that is, well, Donald Trump. As president, Trump was commander-in-chief of the armed forces, but was also publicly disrespectful to members of the armed forces. For example, anytime a U.S. service member dies while serving our country abroad, they are given what is known as a dignified transfer. Their remains are brought back into the U.S. through Dover Air Force Base, and they are carried by a team of military personnel off the airplane and onto the vehicle that will ultimately take the remains to the families. Now, presidents frequently attend dignified transfers as an act of respect for those who have given their lives to the United States. And when he was president, Trump told the press he went to tons of them. His words, to be precise, were that he had attended many, many dignified transfers. For the record, in September of 2020, there had been 96 dignified transfers since Donald Trump took office. President Trump attended 4 of them. Is that what J.D. Vance means when he says Trump is always faithful? There was also the incident in 2018 where Trump reportedly said that nearly 2,000 American Marines were suckers and losers because they died. As Trump reportedly put it, why should I go to that cemetery? It's filled with losers. Now, the Trump White House denied that story when it came out, and of course they did. It would be obviously terrible to call American service members suckers and losers, and then also to be caught doing so. But the problem with the White House denial, even then, was that Trump had already been talking about American service members like that for literally decades. Here was how Trump spoke about former U.S. Senator John McCain, a Navy captain who served for more than 20 years and spent 5.5 of those years as a prisoner of war in Vietnam.
The way Trump looks at it, he's at least better than everyone else in the race, beginning with John McCain.
A little bit. I mean, he was captured.
And he flew combat missions.
Does being captured make you a hero? I don't know. I'm not sure.
Because I don't like losers. But Frank, let me get to it. He hit me. He's not a war hero.
He's a war hero.
He's a war hero.
5.5 years.
He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured, okay? I hate to tell you.
Trump likes people that weren't captured and weren't killed, and not those suckers and losers who died for the country. And then when it comes to Trump's own military service, well, there isn't any. Trump got 4 deferments to avoid being drafted in the Vietnam War. One of them was for bone spurs in his feet. Back in 2018, the daughters of the now deceased Queens podiatrist who gave Trump that bone spurs diagnosis, they said that their father gave that diagnosis to Trump as a favor to Trump's father. Trump's father was the podiatrist's landlord. In exchange for that get out of the draft free card, the family of the podiatrist say the podiatrist got better treatment as one of Trump's father's tenants. The family says they don't even know if Trump was ever even examined for his alleged bone spurs. But that doesn't mean that Donald Trump believes he hasn't served in a strange, twisted, Trumpy version of reality. At this point, I'm going to say that if you have children in the room, you may want to mute the television, because what Trump is about to say here is lewd.
because
you've never gotten a social disease.
It is a dangerous world out there. It's scary. It's like Vietnam, sort of like, the Vietnam era.
It is your personal Vietnam, isn't it?
It is my personal
It is. You've
Vietnam.
said that many
I feel
times.
like a great and very brave soldier.
You say that more people were killed by women in this act than killed in Vietnam?
Yes.
Okay.
That is true.
And you get criticized for that statement, but that statement is very easy.
I even went as far to say that you're braver than any Vietnam vet because you're out there screwing a lot of women.
Dangerous to women than women are to men.
Oh, come on.
Congressional Medal of Honor in actuality.
Donald Trump considers avoiding STDs, sexually transmitted diseases, his own personal Vietnam. And while Trump thinks that John McCain is a loser for actually serving in Vietnam, Trump thinks he should get the Congressional Medal of Honor for his service in his personal Vietnam of avoiding STDs. That is who J.D. Vance thinks is always being faithful to those who put on the uniform. But you don't actually even have to reach into the distant past to see just how much respect or disrespect Donald Trump has for the military. Here was Trump roughly 24 hours ago explaining why he thinks the medal he gave a billionaire conservative donor, why he thinks that medal is actually better than the highest military award in the country.
We gave Miriam the Presidential Medal of Freedom. That's the highest award you can get as a civilian. It's the equivalent of the Congressional Medal of Honor, but civilian version. It's actually much better because everyone gets the Congressional Medal of Honor. That's soldiers. They're either in very bad shape because they've been hit so many times by bullets, or they're dead. She gets it, and she's a healthy, beautiful woman. It's right. And they're rated equal.
Joining me now, New York Congressman Representative Pat Ryan, who served 2 combat tours in Iraq and earned 2 Bronze Stars as an Army intelligence officer. Also with me is New York Times opinion columnist Jamelle Bouie. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for being here. Let me start with you, Congressman Ryan, and just first get your reaction to Trump's comments last night about soldiers who have been killed or maimed in battle.
My blood pressure was already high, Alex, and then I watched that segment, and now I am just outraged and disgusted, not only personally, but just on behalf of those that I served with, those I lost under my command, my fellow West Point cadets. I was just at West Point graduation just a few months ago. You think about the potential that person in Trump, who so degrades and denigrates the honor and the selfless service, could somehow be the commander-in-chief. This isn't just a race for president. It's a race to be the commander-in-chief. And he just completely fails to understand what serving something bigger than oneself is. So he just cannot go anywhere near the White House again. And I hope every single American sees this, because as you outlined, it's another in a long, almost never-ending set of insulting those that have served. It is so deeply unpatriotic and un-American, and it has to be soundly rejected. And I think it will be, as long as we make people aware of it.
Jamelle, it really feels like there is, it does feel like a sort of obsession on Trump's part. We go back, decades. He's been denigrating the service members. He's been talking about people who get killed in battle are suckers and losers. What do you attribute that to? I'm not asking you to be the psychiatrist here, but it sort of seems like in Trump world, every accusation is a confession of a sort, and the fact that he didn't serve, I wonder if you think there's a particular linkage between those two things.
I think the congressman gets it pretty well, which is that Trump is incapable of seeing beyond himself, of understanding why someone would do something that doesn't directly redound to their benefit, and specifically their material benefit, right? Doesn't give them a piece of property or money or what have you, doesn't satisfy their appetites. And so he looks at people who serve first and foremost and is like, I don't understand that, it's stupid. And then he looks at people who died in the course of serving their country and is even more bewildered, even more baffled. Why would you voluntarily put yourself in that kind of situation, when you cannot do that and also satisfy your appetites. And that statement when he was giving out the civilian award, when he was like presidential medal, and he was like, she's still alive and she's beautiful. That to me is the key, right? Why would you sacrifice yourself for anything when you can satisfy your appetites and your ego?